Hi everyone, and welcome to Get Good at Maths. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to the November 2022 Higher GCSE paper from Edexcel. Unfortunately for me, it's the dreaded non-calculator paper, so I'm going to have to use my brain a little bit more than I particularly want to, but whatever, I'm sure we'll be fine, and hopefully you can learn a few tips and tricks from me along the way as we go. So, these are the rules. Don't use a calculator, otherwise you'll get disqualified before you even start. Each paper is worth 80 marks and you get 90 minutes to do your test. So it's roughly about 1 minute per mark, and every question tells you how many marks the question's worth. So this is 3 marks, so you want to spend about 3 minutes doing your question. Okay, here goes. Number 1. Write 500 as a product of powers of its prime factors. Really nice easy question to start off with. A prime number, there are 2 types of numbers, a prime number and a composite number. A prime number, if you take numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, there are only one way to make those prime numbers by multiplying positive integers. So 2, 1 times 2, 3, 1 times 3, 5, 1 times 5. A composite number is the opposite of a prime. So instead of having one way to make the number, there are more than one. So if you take the number 20, you could say 20 is 1 times 20, 5 times 4, 2 times 10. There are 3 ways to make it. So we're trying to find the ways to make 500 just using prime numbers. So we'll start off with 500 and we're going to break it down into 2 factor pairs and circle any primes that we come across. 500 is 5 times 100. 5 is a prime number because I can't break it down anymore. 100 is 5 times 20, circle the 5. 20, 2 times 10, circle your 2. And 10 is 2 times 5, circle your 5, circle your 2. I'm going to write to the examiner 500 equals, and I'm going to times all my prime numbers together. So it's 2 times 2 in size order, 2 times 2 times 5 times 5 times 5. And I would probably want to leave it like that. You can do an index form. Sometimes they do ask you to do that. So I could do 500 equals, there are 2 2's, so 2 squared times 1, 2, 3, 5 cubed. And there we go. So I could leave it in either or. And when you multiply it back, you could say 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. 125 times 2 for 250. 250 times 2 for 500. And it takes you back to the starting point. Nice easy one for 3 marks. So number 2, work out 1 3/5 plus 2 1/4. Give your answer as a mixed number. Now, if you're unaware, a mixed number means you start off with like a whole number, for instance 4, and you have a fraction like a fifth, for instance. So a whole number and then a fraction afterwards. So it says work out 1 3/5 plus 2 1/4, give your answer as a mixed number. Now what I do for these ones is I'm going to ignore the 1 and the 2 to start off with, and I'm just going to add 3/5 and 1/4, and then I'll come back to the front numbers. 3/5 plus 1/4. Now the rule is for this one, you've got to make it a common denominator before you start adding fractions. So I'm going to take the 4 on the right hand side and I'm going to times top and bottom by 4 like this. And then I'm going to take 5 and I'm going to times the other fraction by 5 top and bottom. So 4 times 3 is going to give me 12 on top, 5 times 4 for 20, plus 1 times 5 for 5, and 4 times 5 for 20. Now you can see that they both have 20 as a denominator, and that's literally because 5 times 4, 4 times 5, they mean the exact same thing. The rule is, keep your denominator the same, so it's out of 20, 12 plus 5 for 17. Now I've added my fractions, I can go back and I can add my front numbers. 1 and 2, so 1 and 2 make 3. Drag your 17 20ths over, 17 20ths, and then that will be for 2 marks. Part B, show that 2 2/3 divided by 6 equals 4/9. For this one, you have to turn your 2 2/3 into an improper fraction. So 2 2/3 goes like this. We put a big fraction bar at the bottom, and I'm going to keep my denominator the same, 3. On the top, I'm going to open my bracket and do 2 times 3. So it's the front number times the denominator. 2 times 3, and then I just need to add my remaining 2 on top. 2 times 3 gives you 6. 6 add 2 for 8, and it's 8/3. So 2 2/3 is an equivalent fraction to 8/3. 8/3 divided by 6, and I'm going to have to prove it somehow equals 4/9. Now the rule is, when you divide by 6, I don't want to make the top 6 times bigger, because what happens is, I've just multiplied the whole thing by 6. instead what I actually want to multiply the bottom by 6. The bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. So 8 on top, and it's 3 times 6. 8 on top, 3 times 6 gives you 18, and I need to prove 8 eighteenths is the same as 4 ninths. So if you divide top and bottom by 2, 8 divided by 2 gives you 4, 18 divided by 2 gives you 9. 4 ninths, you can see, and I can just write to the examiner, shown. Number 3. Simplify 2 to the power of minus 5 times 2 to the 8, all raised to the power of 2. Now there are a few rules for this. Law number 1 says that if you ever multiply powers, you just got to make sure that you actually add them together. Number 2 says if you divide powers, make sure you subtract them. And number 3, if you've got brackets like this, it just means you've just got to make sure you times them together. So let's start with this centre bit. 2 to the minus 5 times 2 to the 8. So the rule is you need to be adding them together. So that means 2 to the minus 5 plus 8, which gives you, start on minus 5, add 8 is going to give you 2 cubed. And then it's 2 cubed, and then we can go back to this power of 2. And it's at the very top. This says make sure you multiply them together. So this is 2 to the power of 3 times 2, which is going to give you 2 to the power of 6. So number 4, work out 0.04 times 0.32. Now for these ones, if you multiply horrible decimals in their columns, it's really easy to be maybe 10 times too small or 100 times too big. It's so difficult to keep in track where each number goes in the right column. So for these ones, I typically turn them into fractions first of all. So 0.04, if you count your columns, it goes units, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So this is 4 over 1,000. And I'm going to times it by 0.32, and it goes units, tenths, hundredths, 32 over 100. Now, I know on the bottom, it's got to have a starting number of 1, because we're doing 1,000 times 100. It starts with a number 1, and you just add your zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 100,000. And on the top, it's 4 times 32. A little bit tricky. 32 consists of a 30 and a 2. Make sure you times it by 4 for both of them. 30 times 4 for 120. 2 times 4 for 8. Add them together for 128. And it doesn't say which format you're supposed to leave it in. It could be fractions or decimals. Because it doesn't say, it's fine to leave it as a fraction. 128 over 100,000. For 2 marks. So, final question for today's video, number 5. A car factory is going to make 4 different car models, A, B, C, and D. 80 people are asked which of the 4 models they would be most likely to buy. The table shows information about their results. 23 people went for A, 15 for B, 30 for C, and 12 for D. The factory is going to make 40,000 cars next year. Work out how many Model B cars the factory should make for next year. So what I would do for this one, I would add them up and say, what proportion is 15 out of the total people surveyed? So add them up, 23, 15, 30, and 12. 3 plus 5 for 8, 8 plus 2 for 10, 2 plus 3 for 5, add the 1, 6, 7, 8. So 80 people were surveyed, and B has to be 15 out of those 80 people. Nobody wants to work with 50 out of 80, so if you simplify it by dividing top and bottom by 5, 15 divided by 5 for 3, 80 divided by 5 for 16. So for B, you have got to work out 3/16 of 40,000. So the way we do this, we divide by the bottom and then times by the top. So if you work out 1/16 of 40,000, we do 40,000 and we divide it by 16. So we'll do our 16 times tables, 16, 32, 48. 16 into 40 then is 2 of them, and there's a remainder of 8. 16 into 80 I know is 5, and then I've got 2 zeros left over. So 1/16 of 40,000 is 2,500, and that means 3/16 of 40,000 equals 2,500 times 3 for 7,500. So yes, so 7,500 out of the 40,000 is an equivalent to 3/16, isn't it? Great. Well, that's all we have time for today. Tomorrow we will go through questions 6 to 11, where they do get a little bit trickier from here on, and I will see you all tomorrow. Cheerio.